Hey everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. We're going to start a feature today that may branch out a little bit because I think this is going to be a growing interest among people who have been in the industry for a while, or even those who, as competitors, are just getting started. So, long story short, 30-ish years ago, I'm a college student getting ready for bodybuilding contests at the same time. And some people just, gym people, personal trainers, other competitors pass around diet plans and so forth. And that's what we always did, right? Like that was just normal dieting. And since I was already in a pre-med allied health program, I'm getting some biology, zoology, biochem courses. And I'm thinking, why? That was my question. Like, why? Why do we eat this? Why do we eat that? Why is this a diet plan versus that? What's the objective anyway? How much protein, carbs, and fat? And so at that point, I reverse engineered some of the diet plans we would see in magazines and that, Olympia champions would pass around and publish in magazines. And I just started doing macronutrient tracking, protein, carbs, and fat. Did it for myself. I liked the freedom. I liked the flexibility. I started writing for all the big fitness magazines. I started publishing articles about that. And before I knew it, it became a clear methodology. Somebody along the line named it flexible dieting. And of course, for me, it was always just macronutrient tracking, macro tracking, because that then allowed us that freedom. I can eat whatever foods I want, however it aligns with my goals and my perceived individual body, needs, metabolic phenotypes, etc. And yet I didn't have to be constrained to a rigid meal plan. So fast forward 30 years, now it's a huge trend in our industry because, of course, the pendulum culturally always swings from one extreme to the other to say, no, that's awful. We need to do intuitive eating because rigid tracking harms people. Matter of fact, there is research that shows 75% of newish distorted or disordered eating tendencies can stem from people, I'm going to phrase this two ways, who are doing macronutrient tracking. The other way to interpret that is those who are obsessed with food tracking and data and analytics and monitoring end up doing macronutrient tracking because they find that sense of control. So it's a chicken or the egg issue. But here we are at a place where even as coaches, you kind of get labeled as, are you a macro coach? Are you a meal plan coach? That was kind of a 10-year issue, 10 years ago that started. Now there are more people saying, well, let's maybe just do other things. So I want to end up tying this, Adam, into, what are all the options for anybody to diet? We can name the diet we know, paleo, keto, carnivore, vegetarianism, blah, 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 Mediterranean. But my contention remains, and this is why I said that we may branch out into a couple different areas under this topic umbrella. It's not really a methodology. It's just being aware of the objectiveness. The food we consume does have a certain caloric value. It has a certain level of protein, carbs, and fat as macronutrients. We're going to consume those in certain specific amounts, no matter how we diet. So why not be aware at the base level what those objectives are? But as a first little subtopic to discuss, do you see among clients who come to you more frequently now and saying, well, I don't want to track. Let's do it another way. I'm not good at that, or it makes me a little too obsessive. Are you finding people more resistant to it, or how many different directions are you seeing it taken now?
Honestly, a lot of different directions. And, as a coach that truly offers custom coaching, I think when you reach out to these ginormous teams and they're like, it's a custom program, but we only do macros, a custom coach really should be able to meet the athlete where they are. So I do see variances. I know on my open Zoom calls, sometimes people hear that I gave someone a meal plan and now they're like, maybe I should try that versus macros. It's almost a curse in itself that you do something for one client. Sometimes other clients get curious and maybe they start thinking macros aren't as good as a meal plan. They're like, I would rather have Adam tell me exactly what to eat. I've also developed something that I call the hybrid approach, which maybe we can coin that on Contest Prep University. But I find the plan structure for my athletes when they're at work is really important. And sometimes when they get macros, they get a little carried away. They don't plan enough. They start making mistakes. So we do like maybe the first 4 meals of the day as a meal plan, but when they're at home and things are calmer, they track that last meal. So they're always getting some kind of variety once a day and a meal that they like or a meal that they can pick.
Mhm. So there are definitely, even at that foundational layer, some semantics that lead us to the same place. We just start from a different perspective. Or we definitely can rearrange the order of the steps we take. But ultimately, for success, we still have to have some kind of manageable accuracy and objectivity. So to your point, when somebody's used to, again, 10 or so years ago, people would ask, are you a macro coach or a meal plan coach? I'm like, both. Like, I mean, I give people macronutrient ranges. First of all, if I say I want you to have 172.4 grams of protein a day, and that's exactly what you need because I use this formula, and you think if you're even a gram high or low that, wow, I'm failing, of course, that's an approach that's gone too far into rigidity. But if I say, here's the target, let's try to come within 10% of that on a daily basis. You can be 5 or 10 grams off, and maybe the next, by the end of the week, maybe you've averaged really close. But different days, it's okay. We're still close enough. It was never intended to be that insanely meticulous. But if you say, well, I'd rather just have a meal plan, well, then I'm going to ask you about your schedule. When can you eat? How do you like to eat? What time of the day do you train? When do you need pre-workout, post-workout? Tell me the foods you like. I'm going to create that meal plan for you. It really is not difficult. Takes literal minutes. And you're going to get that. And you're going to be like, wow, this is amazing. This is exactly what I wanted. Thank you. Thank you. I really needed that structure. Within 2 or 3 days, the typical client will say, well, hey, I ran out of this. Can I trade this? Or, I have a meeting this day. I can't do that. What if I combine this and do this? And of course, I'm ready to smack my head and saying, yes, now you're doing flexible dieting. Like that's what I wanted in the beginning. But a lot of people do need those initial steps of structure just to see it, just to relieve some of that anxiety. And that's totally fine. I said this is also a process of maybe just changing the order of steps. I do find a lot of people want to start there. Let's create these heuristics for those numbers. Let's do some meal planning, maybe even an alternate, like here's my weekends, here's my weekdays because schedule changes, etc. And you're just hitting, as long as you're hitting that meal plan, you're being accurate with the macronutrients, even though you're not looking at all those numbers every day. That's totally okay. But that's what we came away from 30 years ago. For you to have daily flexibility when you need it, you could just treat it like a budget. But in terms of the people who feel like it's just too obsessive, it makes me focus too much on the numbers. I'm getting too stressed out weighing and measuring all of my food and so forth. Do you let your clients who are competitors, ostensibly trying to win, trying to get to the next level, win pro cards, do you have anybody that doesn't track at all that is just like, hey, just, eat when you're hungry, do this, do that?
Yeah, the intuitive eating camp. I might have like intuitive weekends, like if they like that word. I prefer it called intelligent weekends, but usually not, not on a, you know, week by week basis, where we're every day of the week going off of how they feel. Maybe with pregnancy clients, when they're getting those food aversions, we might have a couple weeks like that. But then we get back into usually some kind of calorie manipulation. But yeah, in a contest prep, likely not. It really does need to be pretty rigid, pretty structured. Some sort of measure has to happen because, I mean, some preps even come down to the steps. Like we're auto-regulating so many things with our bodies. One of my clients is a trainer, and we talked about how when she sits down during her sessions now on a bench because she's tired, it takes away from our deficit that we were in when she was being a little bit more active or doing burpees with her clients. So that active measure in prep just has to be there. When people tell me like I'm too stressed to track, I usually just kind of have a, kick them in the butt moment where I'm like, if tracking is stressing you out, like think about the people who don't have food to track, and like let's talk about stress now. So like you just have to not pamper those people too much.
That's a really great point, just to start looking at this as a continuum. So you're exactly right. Our primary audience here are competitors. And so that is the price of admission. If you want great results, you're going to have great control and great accuracy. If you're an Olympic athlete or an MMA, UFC fighter, that kind of thing, you're in training camp, fight camp, you're controlling all those variables for a reason, and you've already made the decision. I want this so badly, I'm willing to do that. And so there is an innate amount of either stress and resistance. I'm so tired. I hate this. This is awful. I want to do it an easier way. Why won't my coach do this? Or there's somebody who it never seems to bother them. They just do what needs to be done. And I'll give you an example. One of my clients is just a couple weeks away from a contest, and we're doing some macronutrient adjusting, and it was a little bit different from him than he's used to. I created kind of a 5-day plan for the week, and then the weekends, both days are going to change like this. And he was like, he wanted to hear some explanation, tell me the physiology why we're doing this, and he loved it. He thought that was great. And a few minutes later, he messaged me back an entire meal plan for the weekend as well as the weekday. He said, "How does this look?" And again, it's just math, right? It's just addition and subtraction. He already had the foods he likes. We were changing some variables in terms of the macronutrient quantity. And I looked through the meal planning. I could see where he's adding food on the weekends and et cetera. And I'm like, this looks amazing. This is perfect. And I like the way you did this, and this for these reasons, for energy balance, energy availability. And I said, that's why you look as amazing as you do. And that's why you've won contests, and that's why you're going to win these next contests, because you're willing to do this level of work in the details and then execute it. Whereas other people, like I said, they feel confined and they feel resistant to anything that seems like a constraining factor when it was their decision to do this in the first place. And I think, that's the psychological disconnect, where some people feel like macronutrient tracking is still rigid. We just move the rigidity from the meal planning to the numbers, and they forget that that's actually a huge step of freedom. So there are people who still, feel like that's a massive confinement. And yet, after I did my lecture in Australia for the Sport Nutrition Association, which was titled Beyond Flexible Dieting, and I talked about some of these issues, a coach messaged me and she said, "Joe, your lecture, loved it, phenomenal. I've got to tell you, I had an eating disorder and tracking macronutrients saved my life." She said, "I had an eating disorder because I didn't understand nutrition, and I just felt like I had to follow these specific diets, never understanding the biology, the physiology, the metabolic science. And as soon as I started doing macronutrient tracking, flexible dieting, and I could see how I could manage and control these variables, with massive amounts of freedom, she said that was my salvation. So same thing, right? I mean, one person feels like it's an imprisonment, and one person feels like it was, freeing. So I think that's an important factor, as you said, for those who are going to be successful in competition.
Yeah, this is something I've really been thinking about recently. I have a pretty large crew of Optiva, we'll call them survivors, where they got really great results on the program, but now they're looking to, do something a little bit more sustainable. And it started with, I got a couple, and then they were ultra successful with me. And then now the doors have really opened. So that's been really cool. But, these people drank shakes that were their whole, macro and micronutrient intake for the whole day. And doing that and having no knowledge of macros has been quite the task, and it's been really cool to put these people on meal plans initially. What we've done is almost a curriculum where it's, a meal plan, but you track your refeed or your 2 refeeds per week based on what the client's getting. And then when they get some trust and some, you know, structure to that, then we start having them, hey, let's track your dinner now. And once they get comfortable with that, they're a full believer in the tracking. And it's nice to catch them while they're getting those results on the way down, seeking a little bit more weight loss. I'm actually finding with these clients, when we raise their calories, they're burning more by actually digesting the food and chewing it and so forth. And it's been really cool to see.
Mm. So that's great. You just kind of outlined the other end of the continuum, because there are people, and again, I mean, put yourself in that position, which you and I have not been there for most of our lives, where you don't know anything about nutrition. You don't necessarily have any formal education or experience with this. And so you really are stuck just trying to follow one diet versus another versus another. So ease of use is a great marketing hype. I mean, it's just eat these foods, just drink these shakes. You've seen your friends lose 50 pounds doing this program. And if you do it, because guess what? All of the macronutrients and calories are controlled for you. You don't have to do the math. You don't have to do the meal prep. You don't have to do the weighing and the measuring. It's done for you. Amazing. Sign me up. No barrier to entry except the cost. But then what happens when you're done? Like that was the problem 30 years ago when I created this as a systematic strategy. This gives you lifelong freedom if you're willing to put the work in up front. So even for those people who don't have competitive aspirational goals, in physique sport or performance sport, they want to be healthier, they want to be leaner, they don't want to yo-yo diet any longer. If we don't teach them the way to most easily start objectifying their food, doesn't mean that it's objective, forever. There's also qualitative aspects. We want you to be aligned with your health values. We want you to include enough, good food, fruits, vegetables, etc. It's not just about the numbers. There are qualitative and health value components you have to integrate. But if you leave the accuracy part out, you're going to get what we've always gotten, which is, a 42% obesity rate and a 70% combined obesity overweight rate. And that's not going to go away by abandoning tracking your food for those who are in an active intentional weight loss phase.
Absolutely. I think it comes down to what works for a client may only work for a long, a short amount of time, maybe a long period of time. But I do think in this industry and in the weight loss industry, the success rate needs to be measured lifelong. And for somebody who has had clients for 5 to 10 years, I can think of all the times that we've maybe switched from macro tracking to meal plans because they felt they needed a break from tracking. And once they start getting those negative thoughts of food, it can be really hard to pull them out of that. And you do get those clients you rescue in a sense. But I mean, when we look at the history books, like Adam ate the apple, and I still think that like this day, when we look at things that are forbidden, we tend to want them more. And I find that clients will almost mentally excuse themselves to, find a way out of dieting because it's hard, and it's hard to maintain it. It's hard to maintain that sharpness. But if you truly do learn and you truly use that knowledge, we really stand behind the fact that, our clients can have lifelong progress as long as they use the information that we teach them. But still to this day, I think it's 98% of people regain the weight back that they lost within, I think, 2 years it is.
So you said a bunch of very important things that I think are very necessary to kind of clarify and hash out for people who are competitors out there, and maybe people who are not competing but run across this information. So you use the phrase or the word lifelong several times there, and that's incredibly important because although I totally respect people who want to focus, like we're all in this as coaches and me in particular as a health scientist and educator, because we want people to succeed, right? And we have our personality, psychology, strengths and weaknesses, and our perspectives that we bring to the table. And we're all trying to work on the same problem, and we're trying to help the same clients achieve the same great progress. But we're just kind of tapping on it a little bit differently. And for my friends and colleagues who say, well, no, I just want to do it habit-based coaching, and I don't want to burden people with, tracking and weighing and measuring food and so forth, then I'll say, okay, well, let's look at the outcomes. Since we're all on the same team trying to do the same thing, let's look at the outcomes. The two longest longitudinal studies on successful weight loss maintainers, so you're looking at tens of thousands of people over more than 2 decades, the number one overlapping commonality is that they track and measure their weight and their food in some way. Maybe it's a meal plan, maybe it's macros, whatever, but they track something. In a meta-analysis of 525 studies using non-tracking diet interventions, so anything but tracking, let's look at an alternative to tracking. Huge meta-analysis, hundreds of thousands of people in 525 studies, zero collective weight loss. Zero. Zero. So if you look at the definition of intuitive eating, the literal definition is that it's not intended for weight loss. Well, mission accomplished. Nobody's losing weight. I just don't find those people hiring me. I've never in 30 years had a client come up to me and say, man, I want to hire you to be my nutrition coach, but I don't want to lose weight. I just want to learn how to eat better. Can you please show me things like an apple is better than a donut, that exercising is better than not exercising? I mean, what do we teach people if it's not intended for a goal? Because I just don't see people who don't have goals when it comes to this. Like you said, 80% of people have regained all their weight back within 5 years in the most current study from Kevin Hall at the NIH. So again, I mean, I think most of the people with the greatest intentions from that camp, they understand and empathize with the toughness, the work of having to track and do this and the frustration. And they certainly see the people that maybe that's not, I don't even like to say it's not their best approach. If you have a difficult time tracking your food and yet you want to be healthier, do you have a difficult time driving the speed limit? Do you have a difficult time, turning off the stove when you're done using it? Like what are the other things you're refusing to do because you just don't want to, quote, conform or do the work? Like, that is the barest minimum of you making progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I find people make a lot of excuses and a lot of reasons not to do this, and that's fine. I mean, we as a company will always be okay. Like we kind of don't want those people that just aren't going to do it anyhow. However, I will say we want to lead people into long-term success, so when people find the time that they're ready. And if they want to compete in maybe a healthier manner, this is definitely the team and the company for you. But you have to be willing to accept some accountability because if you leave your stove on because you're lazy, like it's one thing to forget, but because my dad did that like twice, to be honest. But I don't think he did it on purpose. But yeah, I mean, you really do have to have some accountability and some want to do this. And I don't think it's so much as figuring out your why as much as having a goal and a goal to pursue a competition prep. You don't even necessarily have to have a reason to do it. Just if you're wanting to do it and it intrigues you, go ahead and jump in.
Well, I'll give you an example because again, we've outlined that continuum of, high level competitors who want to win, and this is probably not an issue for them. They're on team tracking. But the other side is, okay, I'm willing to do it. I don't love it, but if it's going to get me the results, can we promise long-term success for them as well? And as I said, those two longitudinal studies show that is the number one common denominator of success. But the irony is, once you learn this, you don't have to do it forever. I don't track my macros. I mean, I know what's in the food I eat. So if I decide to have a half a cup of oatmeal or three quarters or a full cup, I know exactly how many grams of carbs I'm getting. I don't have to put that in an app. I don't have to put it on paper. If I'm looking at a chicken breast, I can tell like, whoa, that's saying 7 or 8 ounces. I'm out for dinner and it's an entree. Or at home, I can, get 4 or 5. Like I know because I've tracked. And so I cannot make mistakes because I just didn't understand or I was just outside of my scope of knowledge. If I eat too much now, it's with eyes wide open. If I eat the quote wrong food, I'm at a restaurant and I'm ordering something with all these sauces and fats and so forth. Because I know what I know, I can look at those selections and I know what I'm ordering. If I've never tracked my food, then I will be a constant yo-yo dieter because I'm just not going to have that same level of knowledge. But so again, the freedom comes in tracking at some point, so you don't have to track forever.
Mhm.
Again, the people who say this is too stressful, too hyper fixated, I would say the problem is not that, it's your approach or your attitude toward it. So in my lecture Beyond Flexible Dieting, I talk about brain health, stress, your relationship with food, neuroplasticity, how to reduce threat physiology in your brain so your amygdala is not on fire every time you feel like, oh my gosh, I got a meal prep. Oh my gosh, is that an ounce too much or half an ounce too little? If you go through that kind of rumination and catastrophizing, it's not that you have a problem with tracking or numbers or math or food. You have some kind of internal relationship orientation problem with food. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. You need to work on those parts of your psychology and even your brain health physically at the same time, or maybe even before you work on, real food goals, but they are not the same thing.
Yeah. Or that person needs to get so fat that they get kicked in the butt and they have no other choice, right? Like it
Happens.
it's happened to me. I mean, like I've had, a failed reverse diet before where I was just like, I'm just not going to track. Well, like that noose got tighter and I got to a point where I was like, you know what, no more. and so for me to be able to say that I've had experience with that, it's not just me being mean, but that's the other alternative. And it's best just not to even get there in the first place, because most people will get there, with the statistics on obesity. It's just so common. And to follow up with that, what's the number one indicator of mortality? It's actually body size. It's not even body composition. So, the bigger you are, the heavier you are, the more taxing on your system all of this is going to be.
Right. And man, you just brought up another great point. I'm not going to extend this too far so we can wrap up, but you know everything you need to know about nutrition. You have tracked macros. The knowledge you have about individual foods is as good as anybody's. And yet you said coming out of a contest prep, you let yourself get too heavy. And I have too, like we all have. There's a lot of physiology and psychology that rolls into that. But again, maybe the dopaminergic system, because, you put everything 24 hours a day into this goal and it's, I'm going to do this. And you have a great, all of your expectations and all of your goal acquisition was happening along the way. You're progressing, you're seeing that great, body image change every single week. And then one day it's just over. It's just over. That's a literal crashing of your mesolimbic system in your brain. Again, has nothing to do with numbers, has nothing to do with tracking, has nothing to do with measuring food. That's a brain health and psychology issue. And it's to be expected. I mean, it's something we have to consider, ahead of time, that we need to be ready to manage. It's almost like postpartum depression. Um, but again, two separate things. Those happen to all of us, even with the best sets of knowledge and skills as well as intentions, and we all have to deal with it. But the way you and I and other people come back or shorten that leash is because we know what we need to do. Again, we're not blindsided. We can get back into more of the objective side while we work on our internal motivation.
Absolutely.
Okay, so final steps for you guys who are watching or listening to this. Just understand that it's not a method. It's not a choice to say, well, I'm going to do this diet instead of tracking my macros. I'm going to do this diet instead of flexible dieting. Flexible dieting, macronutrient tracking is just simply home base. It's just the objective measurement of food going in your body, just like how big your gas tank is in your car, how many gallons of gas can fit in there, et cetera, how many gallons of water can fit in your pool or bathtub. That's all that is. You're just going into it with a high level of awareness and precision in monitoring that. Then you get to make all those decisions how you want to interact. Because even for high level competitors, as you guys watching this, you can be like my client who took those numbers, made a meal plan he likes, all the foods he likes, the time he needs it, supports his training and recovery. And then he would never have to track if he just said, Joe, I'm just eating what I showed you. I mean, I do my meal prep, I weigh it, I measure it. He doesn't have to put those numbers anywhere. They're already accounted for as a heuristic for what's going in his body. That's the extreme level of control, using food knowledge so that you don't have to weigh and track and measure every day, just once a week or so. And then that floats into your daily behaviors later in life when you just need to draw upon that knowledge for reasons that aren't competitive. That's an important part of this. We want you guys to be healthy and have great longevity and functionality long into life beyond your competitive years. So we'll let you go with that. Again, thanks for watching Contest Prep University. If you're interested, don't forget we have Contest Prep University D1 Club, a private group that we chat about things like this together and have some open meetings and discussions, but you can message us about that. We'll see you next time in Contest Prep University.